In the early 19th century, a diagnosis of bladder stones was a death sentence. It meant either an agonizing death or a barbaric operation with negligible chances of survival. It was into this world of suffering that Jean Civiale, a young French surgeon, emerged. He wasn't just seeking a solution, he proposed the unthinkable, destroying stones inside the body without a single incision. This invention, lithotripsy, was more than just a new method. It shattered centuries-old dogmas, challenging the entire established medical world. Civiale became a pioneer, daring to achieve the impossible. His method worked. Dozens, hundreds, then thousands of patients were saved from terrible suffering and certain death. But success brought more than just fame. It ignited fierce resistance. Forget the myths of instant epiphanies, of eureka moments in a bathtub. Great scientific breakthroughs are always a long, grueling battle, a fight against ignorance, against inertia, against those who defend the old order. Jean Civiale's story is the clearest proof of this. It's not a fairy tale about a genius. It's a chronicle of audacity, persistence, and an unwavering belief in science. This is how the world changes. For centuries, until the early 19th century, humanity remained defenseless against internal diseases. Medicine, shackled by ancient dogmas and superstitions, possessed neither the tools nor the knowledge to combat ailments hidden within the body. Doctors rarely performed dissections, anatomy remained a closely guarded secret, and any attempt to challenge the teachings of ancient authorities was considered sacrilege. Diagnosis was reduced to guesswork and treatment to the helpless observation of life fading away. When it came to bladder stones, the only solution was open surgery. This was not a cure, but torture. Performed without anesthesia or antiseptics on a dirty operating table where surgeons, often barbers, acted crudely, relying solely on force and speed. The incision frequently led to fatal bleeding or inevitable infection. Wounds were cauterized with red-hot iron, and boiling oil was considered an effective disinfectant. Pus oozing from wounds was seen as a laudable sign of cleansing rather than a harbinger of sepsis. This was more than just a lack of tools or technology. It was a deeply ingrained philosophy where dogma prevailed over observation and tradition over progress. Illness was perceived as an inevitable punishment, and death as a natural, albeit agonizing, outcome. Hundreds of thousands suffered and died in despair, without any hope of relief. This world, plunged into medical darkness, awaited its moment, a moment when someone would dare to challenge centuries of prejudice and demonstrate that changing the impossible was, in fact, real. That someone was Jean Civiale. Born in 1792 in the tiny French village of Nontron, he came from a humble family that nonetheless provided him with an education. Young Civiale arrived in Paris, the capital of medical discoveries, and enrolled in one of the city's main hospitals, Salpêtrière. There, he became a direct daily witness to the horrific operations for stone removal. He saw the patient's screams. He saw surgeons, elbow-deep in blood, rushing to finish the torture before the unfortunate soul died right on the table. He saw the faces of those who survived, contorted by pain and fear, and the faces of those who didn't. There were many of them, far too many. Dozens, hundreds of lives ended there. Young Civiale could not accept this reality. He could not reconcile himself with the inevitability of such brutality. He was not indifferent. He didn't just observe. He thought. He asked questions. Why was this method the only one? Why couldn't medicine, which considered itself a science, find another way? What if the problem wasn't the stone, but the method of its removal? He saw a dead end. He saw despair killing hope. His colleagues, older doctors, accepted this as a given. It had always been this way. It would always be. But Civiale refused to believe. His soul could not accept such a barbaric reality. He studied anatomy. He read ancient treatises. He sought answers in books. He sought them in his own experience. He began to question the very foundation, what seemed unshakable. He was not just looking for an improvement. He was looking for a path beyond, a completely new approach to a disease that, until then, seemed invincible. His quest extended beyond libraries. Civiale took it to the anatomical theater and then to his modest laboratory. He didn't just read, he dissected, he modeled. He tried to understand how to reach the stone without an incision and how to destroy it without damaging the fragile tissues. The first challenge was access. He developed incredibly thin tubes that could pass through the body's natural channels, specifically the urethra. This in itself was a breakthrough. No one before him had conceived of such a path. But accessing the stone was one thing, destroying it was quite another. His early experiments were meticulous. He tried various methods, mechanical crushing, drilling. One day, while working on a bladder model, he encountered a problem. He ran out of oil, the very substance used to lubricate instruments, reduce friction, and perhaps even create the hydraulic pressure needed for crushing. It was a dead end. But Civiale did not give up. He looked at his tools in a new light. He had forceps, knives, miniature drills. What if he abandoned the oil medium? What if he applied a direct, sharp impact, or a rotational movement? He chose the latter. He took a miniature drill which he himself had designed and used it without lubrication, without a protective medium. He inserted the drill into the model and set it in motion, and the stone, hard and seemingly indestructible, began to crumble, slowly at first, then faster. There was no usual resistance, just a slight grinding sound. The stone disintegrated into small fragments, into dust, into sand. This was the moment of truth, the moment when the impossible became tangible. He saw it with his own eyes, not a theoretical assumption, not a guess, a concrete, repeatable result. The stone, which had been killing people for decades, was defeated, not through a barbaric incision, but through precise, delicate intervention. This was not just a method, it was a new philosophy, a philosophy of minimal invasiveness, a philosophy that would revolutionize medicine. The moment of truth had arrived, the stone crumbled. But between a successful experiment on a model and saving a human life lay a chasm. Civiale understood this. His genius lay not only in insight, but also in methodical, tireless work. He did not stop at one breakthrough. He began to dissect again and again. He worked with anatomical specimens, studying millimeter by millimeter the fragile tissues of the bladder, their elasticity, their vulnerability. His goal was not merely to destroy the stone, but to do so with absolute safety, without the slightest harm to the patient. He returned to his instruments. The drill, which had proven itself on the model, was only the beginning. Civiale realized he needed not just one instrument, but an entire system. He began to design. Every detail, from the thinnest guide wire that could painlessly pass through natural channels to miniature forceps and drills, was the result of painstaking drawings, trials, and errors. He made prototypes, he tested them, he discarded unsuccessful solutions, and he started over. It was a process of continuous improvement, driven by empirical methods. He observed, he changed, he checked. If an instrument left even the slightest scratch on the tissue, it was sent back for redesign. If stone fragments were too large for natural expulsion, Civiale created more powerful crushers or improved graspers. He faced the problem of visibility. How could he control the process inside the body? He experimented with lighting, with optical systems, anticipating the ideas of endoscopy. He sought ways to irrigate the cavity, to remove the tiniest particles that had turned into sand. Every failure, every dead end, became for him not an obstacle, but a new starting point. He learned from every mistake, transforming them into steps towards perfection. By 1823, Civiale was ready. He had not merely created a method, he had developed a complete medical procedure equipped with unique instruments. And he did something that, at the time, was no less revolutionary than the invention itself. He published his discoveries. Not in Latin, the language of the scientific establishment accessible only to a select few, but in French, the native language of most doctors. This step was a conscious act of democratizing knowledge. He wanted his method to become accessible to all who could use it, rather than remaining a secret for a narrow circle of initiates. His articles were detailed guides describing every step of the procedure, every instrument, every subtlety. He didn't just announce a breakthrough, he showed how to replicate it, and how to save a life. Jean Civiale unveiled his method to the world, and the world responded not with applause, but with furious rejection. His detailed articles, intended to spread knowledge, became the pretext for a massive attack. The medical establishment of Paris met lithotripsy not as a breakthrough, but as a personal insult. Old professors, chief surgeons of prestigious hospitals, veterans who had practiced open surgery for decades, saw Civiale as an upstart, a threat. He challenged not just a method, he challenged their authority, their reputation, their financial well-being. How could a young man, without decades of bloody practice, propose something so radical and, crucially, so safe? Accusations poured in instantly. First, whispers in the corridors, then open denunciations. Civiale was called a charlatan, his method a dangerous gamble. "Impossible," cried his opponents, "to destroy a stone inside the body without harming the delicate tissues? That's pure madness. It will lead to inevitable death from bladder rupture, from infection, from hemorrhage." They claimed his patients were victims of deception and their healing a temporary phenomenon or pure mystification. The Paris Medical Academy, a bastion of conservatism, became the arena for fierce debates. Learned men, accustomed to abstract discussions, now vehemently argued the impossibility of lithotripsy. They cited ancient authorities, established rules, and their own centuries-old experience, which, in their opinion, left no room for such miracles. For them, medicine was a set of dogmas, not a field for daring experiments. Civiale did not back down. He responded not with words, but with results. He presented cured patients. He demonstrated his instruments. He offered to repeat the procedure in the presence of a commission. But his opponents were blind. They refused to believe their own eyes. They were afraid of change, afraid to admit that their long-held knowledge was obsolete. However, Civiale also found defenders. Not everyone in the medical world was a prisoner of inertia. Some doctors who had witnessed the horrors of old surgery were willing to take a risk. Among them were influential figures. The chief surgeon of Salpêtrière Hospital, where Civiale had once been a student, spoke in his support. He saw lives changing. He saw relief. He saw that the method worked. Baron Georges Cuvier played a crucial role. A great naturalist, a member of the French Academy of Sciences, and one of Europe's most authoritative scientists, Cuvier, a man of strict scientific principles, could not ignore empirical evidence. He personally attended several operations. He saw how a stone turned into sand. He saw how patients returned to life. His support became a powerful shield. He declared, "I saw it. It works. It is the future of medicine." The support of Cuvier and other, less famous but no less courageous doctors was critically important. They didn't just believe Civiale, they saw real, tangible results. They understood that not only scientific truth was at stake, but also hundreds of thousands of human lives. Conservatives tried to ban lithotripsy. They demanded official condemnation, but the voice of those who saw hope grew louder. The battle for the future of medicine had only just begun. The conservatives demanded a ban. They sought official condemnation. And so, in 1824, the Paris Medical Academy appointed a commission. This was not merely a review, it was a trial of the method, of the man, of the future of medicine. Everything was at stake: Civiale's reputation, the fate of his invention, and tens of thousands of lives that could be saved. The commission was led by Baron Georges Cuvier, his main defender. But most of its members were skeptics. They had practiced the old barbaric surgery for decades. Their world was crumbling. They awaited failure. They came to witness proof of charlatanism. The meeting hall was full. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. Civiale, standing before his accusers, remained calm. He did not deliver fiery speeches. He did not argue. He offered the only thing that could break their resistance: a demonstration, not on a model, on a living human being. A patient suffering from bladder stones agreed to the procedure. He was brought into the hall in front of everyone. Civiale prepared his instruments, the thinnest guide wires, miniature drills. He acted slowly, precisely, without haste. He inserted the instruments. No incision, not a drop of blood. The commission members, leaning over the patient, watched intently. They heard a slight grinding, the sound of the stone being destroyed. Disbelieving faces began to change. Skepticism gave way to astonishment. The procedure lasted several minutes. Then Civiale withdrew the instruments. The stone, previously whole, was now transformed into the tiniest fragments, into dust, into sand. It was undeniable. It was real. The patient, who just minutes before had been in agonizing pain, stood up. He was alive. He was well. No complications, no pain, no bleeding. He was cured. The hall erupted, not in arguments, not in accusations, but in thunderous approval. It was a triumph, not just for Civiale. It was a triumph of reason over dogma, a triumph of science over prejudice. The commission, amazed by what they saw, unanimously rendered its verdict: lithotripsy was a safe, effective method of treatment. Overnight, Jean Civiale transformed from an outcast into a national hero. His name became a symbol of medical progress. The Paris Medical Academy, which had called him a charlatan just yesterday, now bestowed its highest honors upon him. King Louis XVII personally awarded him the Legion of Honor. It was recognition, not just of talent, recognition of audacity, of persistence, of an unwavering belief that the impossible was real. His method spread throughout the world. Doctors from England, Germany, and Russia came to Paris to learn from him. They saw how the fate of their patients changed. Dying people returned to life. Jean Civiale showed the way to a new medicine, a medicine where the main priority was not tradition, but the salvation of human life. He became more than just a surgeon, he became a visionary. Civiale's victory was tangible. It changed not only the fates of patients, but also the very approach to surgery. Treatment protocols that had remained unchanged for centuries crumbled. Before him, open surgery for stone removal carried enormous risk, with mortality rates reaching 50% and sometimes even 70%. This meant that every second, or even every third, patient who underwent the operation died. Lithotripsy reduced this figure to a statistical error, virtually zero. The risk of death plummeted tenfold. The new method changed not only survival rates, but also the quality of life. Recovery time after open surgery was measured in weeks, often months, full of pain, pus, and the threat of infection. After lithotripsy, patients left the clinic within a few days, without incisions, without scars, without a painful healing period. They returned to a full life. These astonishing results led to tectonic shifts in the very structure of medicine. Medical faculties worldwide began to integrate lithotripsy into their curricula. Surgeons, accustomed to brute force, now learned delicate precision. A new medical specialization emerged: urology. Entire hospital departments were re-equipped for the needs of minimally invasive surgery. The instruments designed by Civiale became the standard. Their production was established by major pharmaceutical companies and hospitals across the continent. purchased them. This was not just a new instrument, it was a new standard, a new philosophy. Medicine began to believe in the possibility of curing internal diseases without a scalpel, without pain, without barbarism. And this was just the first but crucial step towards the modern surgery we know today. Jean Civiale didn't just free humanity from a tormenting disease. He showed that the body is not a fortress to be stormed, but a complex mechanism requiring a delicate approach. His lithotripsy, which today seems merely a first step, became a manifesto for a new era, an era where the scalpel yields to precision and pain to mercy. His struggle proved that true progress always breaks through inertia and fear. He changed not only treatment methods, but also the very attitude towards human life, laying the foundation for all modern minimally invasive surgery. He was a prophet of the future he himself began to build.